Hello, 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 friends and fellow writers. This group is the Heritage Writers Community, and tonight, or this afternoon, we got a pretty good show for you. I hope you get interested. We're going to hear from Dr. Jose Canto. He's going to read some of it from his novel, A Legacy, and discuss that. Leslie Liberty, Dr. Liberty, is going to tell us a little bit about what's going on around town and the artists. Ann Struck, Bishop Struck, is going to give a reading of and discuss some of her poetry. I'll be back a little later in the program and talk about archetypes as a literary device and exploring self and the world as we as artists experience. And then Manuel Comacho and Ann Struck are going to join together to read. Manuel will read poetry, his own writing poetry in Spanish, and Ann will give the English version of that. And then that'll lead to a discussion of the problems of translation in culture. So, Dr. Canto.
I'm going to introduce Jose, Dr. Canto. He's one of the writers of the Heritage Writers Community. He has a doctorate in public administration and has worked for many years in for various agencies, including the USPS. He's on the board of directors for the Tuliberg Press and has written 2 novels while developing his craft, Did I Deuce, Full Circle, and actually several novels since then. He describes, Dr. Canto describes his writing style as a kind of a cross between Ray Bradbury and perhaps historical fiction. He is also an award-winning poet, and today Jose is going to read some of his work from The Legacy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, I'd like to read a segment of my book titled The Legacy, A Heritage of Hate. This being March, the first thing came to my mind was, in fact, the Ides of March. And in my vision, the Ides of March, to me, represents a breeze or a wind bringing with it a portent of evil things to come. In that regard, or in that context, there is a segment of my book that would apply to that context. Let me share it with you. Within a few weeks, autumn shadows were taking hold of the magnificent compound, which now more closely resembled a historical landmark in a park-like setting than the lair of an Aryan supremacist. The tall and stately 3-story structure reminded Johann of the White House, as if the facility had been erected to serve as its rival in this hidden Idaho valley. The park-like grounds virtually exploded with the luxuriant greens of a well-maintained, well-supported endeavor. Johann had held many meetings in his headquarters as the newly proclaimed leader of the new Reich. Representatives from around the world had been attending these meetings at the Idaho site, addressing the need for change in a world without order, harmony, symmetry, or accord. The compound guests conveyed a sense of power in their raw, calloused, and untamed character, particularly given the austerity noted on their faces. In the calm of the evening, however, a sense of change began to close around the new Nazi command center. The grounds gave rise to noises unnatural to the stillness of the remote setting, sounds of human flesh on softly stroked silk. Leaves at rest on the perimeter of the enclave were at rest no more. They were blown about as if disturbed from the surface of their autumn gold retreat, as though aroused from their present tomb to an early resurrection. And in the midst of this unexpected wind, the caw of the crow was heard once more. The leaves stirred to life, tossed about as if disturbed from their couch of autumn's wealth, roused from their present state like Jairus' daughter, called back by the Nazarene from a youthful demise. And in the midst of this unexpected gust, leaves once dead whirled briskly in the vigor of the wind and dashed themselves against the shutters of the dark and silent lair. That blasted crow knew whither was on its way, said Udall. The chief attendant in charge of all domestic duties ensured all shutters were closed and candles lit. throughout the headquarters in preparation for the coming storm. The flames from the candles in the sitting room were promptly drawn toward the open fireplace flue. Perhaps you should retire for the night, mein Führer, suggested Udall. No sense in both of us waiting out this storm. I'll take the night watch and confirm that our sentries are at their posts. Johann nodded in agreement. Right. These high ceilings just seem to draw the outside draft straight into the house, he said, as he walked slowly away. Udall arose in respect to the Fuhrer as Johann exited the sitting area. Then, as if by force of habit, Udall returned to his place on the sofa directly in front of the unlit fireplace. There he primed himself to weather the storm throughout the night. All was ready now. Nothing was left to chance. Waiting, however, was the most difficult interlude of all. Johann lay in his bedroom but didn't sleep. He listened to the heightening storm in the depths of the night. Minutes seemed as years. He couldn't bear to think that an attack upon his beloved Wolf's Lair, constructed as a tribute to his father, might be endangered by the power of the storm. He could sense the dampness of the earth as if it were preparing for nature's outburst yet to come. Beads of rain began to splatter on the windows, drop by drop, as the storm clouds conveyed their massive cargo to the ground. Then there was a clamorous grating that evolved into a resounding, booming roll. This was followed by a chilling shock that seemed to shift Wolf's Lair on its very foundation. With that sudden jolt, the entire edifice groaned. Was it the wind? Was it thunder, a lightning strike nearby, an earthquake? Shots rang out. Johann threw back the covers and sat on the edge of his bed, alert to anything that might be uncharacteristic of a storm common to Idaho. Was it gunfire he heard? Was it nothing more than thunder? Shots rang out again, and this time there was no doubt. Wolf's Lair was under attack. Johann hurriedly dressed and ran to ensure the safety of the Lair's guests and personnel. He raced down the long, empty corridor and spotted his colonel. "Carry out your orders," he shouted. "Have your men report to their posts. You know your general orders. Tonight's the night for battle." "Done, mein Führer. Our men won't let you down." This assault, however, didn't come from an untrained guerrilla force. It was a fixed and controlled assault by troops of another kind. The captain of the guard, visible to Johann on the compound security cameras, was issuing his orders to the small cadre of overmatched, though dedicated, Aryan troops. Snippets of heated exchanges came through the cavernous candle-lit halls of the lair. "Have you checked on the Gerhard boys?" shouted Johann through the disturbance of the night. "Where?" answered Johann. "Upstairs. The two young brothers, Rolf and a teenager in Karl, and scarcely more than 10, came running onto the scene with their utter confusion and fear appearing on their faces. "Don't worry, boys," Johann reassured them. We may be ambushed, but we're not done yet. God didn't bring us to America to end our lives like this, not without a fight. You boys follow me. Colonel Udall, take care of the staff. I'll lead the boys." Boom, boom, boom. That's a scene from my segment of my book.
That's quite a scene. That's quite a scene. Now, why is that scene central? You got to give some context to the listeners here.
Only in context of the March Ides of March, the scene of something evil coming, and to Johann Hitler, the alleged son of Adolf Hitler, this was a portent of things to come, and indeed he was right. His lair, domiciled in Idaho, was under attack by local forces that wanted to oust the Aryan tides that were beginning to form in central Idaho.
But what I was thinking of, though, in the context of the story as a whole, it's a turning point. And why is it a turning point? What happens?
Because at this point in time, Johann Hitler flees the burning compound, and in the night, shots ring out, and he's flying away from the shots, and he continues running into the hills of Idaho, falls into a deep chasm, hits his head on a rock, and he's there for days before he comes to with amnesia. Now he no longer knows who he is, and he assumes a new name and identity into the Commonwealth, if you will, of America, until later a flash comes back to his mind, and he realizes who he is. The son of Adolf Hitler.
That's quite a story.
No, thank you. I hope it is.
Okay, all right. Anybody want to comment or have questions for Jose on this?
Well, I like the crow motif. I've read your book, and I really like the way it kind of carries some of the plot devices and some of the other motifs in your work. It's
That makes
very
one.
interesting. Okay, well, but you've got one, so that's
All
good.
right.
Leslie, while you're up at bat, why don't you give a little report on the
Okay.
artists and art going on around town here?
All right. There's lots going on around town, around Stockton. I'm just going to give you a few opportunities for writers. And one of them is the first Thursday of the month at the Hagen Museum in the basement. The Heritage Writers Community meets from 6 to 8. We welcome writers. We do critique work. We do performance of our art. Sometimes we perform at the Hagen. Well, right now we're performing here at this wonderful radio station. So if you're interested, you can just show up, or you can contact Robert, our fearless leader, Robert Reinert, and his email address, which I'll give again later, is rreinarts22@comcast.net. That's RREINARTS 22@comcast.net. So get your voice heard. Come show up. And also the second and fourth Thursdays of the month, there is storytelling. The second Thursday of the month is in Spanish. It's given at the Court Building, which is 343 East Main Street, through our lovely local organization, The Right Place. What they do, or what you can do when you show up, is any story that you have, poetry, theater, cultural capsules. The same group meets, or an affiliated group meets, on the fourth Thursday of the month, and you can tell your story in English. You can do both. That would be wonderful. So that's the second and fourth Thursdays of the month through The Right Place at 343 East Main Street, and it's storytelling in Spanish on the second Thursday of the month and in English on the fourth Thursday of the month. The second Saturday of the month, the San Joaquin Valley branch of the California Writers Club meets from 12:30 to about 2:30. We have a speaker almost every month. We meet at the Gladys L. Bernard School of Education at UOP, which is 870 Brubeck Way here in Stockton. The California Writers Club is one of the oldest writers clubs in California. It was begun in 1909 by Jack London, Gertrude Stein, and some other California writers. And we have a long and storied history, so do please show up. We have wonderful presenters, and every writer is welcome. We're also affiliated with several critique groups, and I have found, and many writers have found, though not all, many writers have found a critique group key to helping them explore and hone their craft. There you have it.
Okay, thank you. Let's shift now and talk to Ann Struck a little bit here. She's a poet, a writer, playwriter as well. Why don't you dig in and give us a treat to some of your work?
Okay, a little bit more of an introduction concerning Ann. Ann Bishop Struck is a speech and language pathologist, and as Robert mentioned, Ann is a poet, playwright, essayist, and humorist, and loves words and the love of writing, which she got from her mother. She has taken the middle name Bishop, which is her mother's name, to honor the feminine and honor the woman in her life, her mother. And Struck is the name, her given name as her maiden name. And she's a wonderful wordsmith.
Oh, very sweet. Well, this is a real about face here from from yours. It's very light. The Ides of March will have come and gone, perhaps. And spring vacation is coming. So, how would you like to go to the pier at Santa Cruz, visit Mr. Pelican? Oh, here he is. Mr. Pelican, your webbed gray feet match the weathered rail of the pier.
Thank you.
Are you here by Darwinian principle? Your head rests at the end of the S in your neck, made backward, read your way. Are you dyslexic, or merely a mirror of me? Your long beak is a giant fork handle with one crooked tine, a full-time task to maneuver. Your wide eyes at its end miss nothing. You could be adorable. Your composure lures closer children of all ages, but you have an invisible ring. Two brothers break it. You pursue the smallest boy in the blue. He runs away, for you have decided he is lowest of all in the pecking order. You clap the jaws of your beak together like a couple of old boards. A kind mother and her son have bought a fresh plastic bag of sardines for you. The boy carefully throws you a fish. You proudly await his correct aim. If he misses, the fish falls to the pier, unretrieved. You are no beggar. He succeeds. The fish folds inside your elastic chin, then gulp. A small crowd has gathered. You have become a celebrity. Without that fork, you could be adorable. The crowd does a cautious dance with you, retreating in small waves as your beak opens slowly in warning. Your patience can end with us. For whose pier is this? Whose home is this ocean? You continue to hold territory on the rail. We continue to watch you to the sounds of the lounging seals as they lie barking and snuffling, scratching themselves with rear flippers, blinking their eyes, readjusting their whiskered heads, happy as pillows among the comfortingly familiar and inconsequential asthmatic vociferations of their relatives, as on the beams by the tamed ocean waves they laze at the base of the pier.
Very nice, thank you.
Very nice, very nice.
Perhaps during spring vacation, the children would like to visit this magical town, the town of Giggle and Leap. In the town of Giggle and Leap, the children don't go to sleep. They play all night while the moon is bright. In the morning they fall in a heap. In the town of Giggle and Leap, don't bother to count your sheep. You stay awake and you laugh and shake. In the morning you don't make a peep. In the town of Giggle and Leap, you don't see anyone weep. With puns and funs you welcome the sun, and your sadness you never can keep.
That was cute. What was the name of that, Ann?
In the town of Giggle and Leap.
And Leap, okay.
I woke up one morning, and this happens, this is a good thing for a writer to remember. You may wake up before your editor wakes up, so to speak. And if you can grab, and this was town of Giggle and Leap, or just Giggle and Leap, I grabbed it and kept it and then wrote it down. You have to write it down, at least if you're me.
That was really cute. Really well done.
It might be
I like
fun to
it.
get kids to bed, like, oh no, it's
Giggle
not
and
gonna
leap.
happen.
You have to write anything down if you want to remember it as recalling it from sleep, because if you
Yes.
don't, about
Yeah.
It's gone.
5 or 10
It's
minutes
gone.
later, it's
Yeah.
gone.
Gone, yeah.
Don't count on it to stay. Get it right away. Now, in these days of coronavirus, we do want to build our immunity by eating good, nutritious foods.
Absolutely.
And here are words to accompany a beautiful picture poster that I once saw. And this piece is called Heaven on Plates. So, celebrate with nature's marvels who you are. Eat some acorn squash, Swiss chard and spinach, Idaho potatoes, cantaloupe, or orange, even if you never ate them much before. Include some collard greens, tomato lycopene, green pepper, sweet potato, apples, grapefruit, broccoli, and cauliflower, even more. If you try some Brussels sprouts and Brussels sprouts, papaya, apricots, and onions, you'll find out they're not a bore. You'll be slim and healthy, happy, eating green beans long and snappy. You can even grow 'em or just buy 'em at the store. Remember prunes, or eat an unctuous avocado, strawberries so red and fresh, and some celery. Also cabbage from Savoy. It's okay to taste kohlrabi. I don't hate it, 'cause I never ate it. Kale, kiwi, bunches of bananas, carrots whole or carrots grated, red potatoes, lettuce. Let us eat as rabbits do. For rabbits are, without debate, the first to know that heaven can be down. Rabbits are in heaven, maybe one, maybe it's 7, simply living, chomping, hopping in it, high above their hidey holes where it is found. We heavy humans are, however, slower, since we seldom wish to lower that far down. We could avoid disaster if we ate there sooner, first, and faster, but simply stated, we are seldom sated unless the food is grown in gardens and is shipped and crated. To partake, we're not ill-fated, but we've too often overweighted, for we prefer to make a formal date, maybe with some Ned or Kate, for heaven, 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 whose height is highly overrated, to be served to us upon a plate.
Made me hungry listening to that. I love salads.
Yeah.
That was very nice. That was very nice. So, tell us a little bit about the act of your writing. Just what do you do?
The what?
Your act of writing.
It's when it comes to me, unfortunately. I think I recently attended a conference of what I call Squibby, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators in New York City. And for the first time, I realized that if I really wanted to be a writer, it was incumbent upon me to act like one and treat it like a job.
Here's a pencil.
That's right. And I am not a writer unless I am writing, but I realized that I really needed to dedicate time. We're talking 4 hours a day, perhaps, or more. Other writers do write it for a lot longer. And decide what I don't want to do in my life, to push that out and make the time for the writing. So that's part of it. But a lot of it just comes from a feeling I have. I think I've been working on meditation, trying to get in touch with that right brain. I'm so very left brain, like probably a lot of us brained. And when I get in touch with that right brain, I start using imagery in my mind, and I like to write from imagery. I think that's when I'm perhaps the most effective. Although I do love playing with words, word sounds naturally, and just making all kinds of plays, puns, and so on. Also, I like to experiment with words on the page, and this writing about heaven on plates is in the shape of some kind of a fruit or vegetable.
Looks like a turnip to me.
Okay, so it's a turnip. Whatever it is will turn up and
Yeah,
should be
there you
used
go.
in your life.
Yeah.
Eaten.
Why, thank you, Ann. Thank you very
welcome.
much.
My pleasure.
Okay. I'm going to give a try at talking about the idea of archetypes in writing. A lot of years ago, say like in 1956, when I was in graduate school, long before many of you were even born, a lot of conversations, when you engaged in conversations, when somebody was about to speak their piece, they would start it off by saying, well, my analyst says that, thus giving some authoritarian dimension to whatever it was they had to say. Needless to say, if you weren't in analysis, people tended to regard your opinions as either superficial or short-sighted, something or other, not worth hearing much about. In that era, the analytic philosophers, Jung, Freud, Adler, I think, were what psychology was all about. Anything that was long and tubular was a symbol of a penis. The jokes generally were about anything that had so-called Freudian implications. That's disappeared from psychology by and large, and for a lot of reasons. In case of Jung, his writing is in kind of an archaic form of German, and it's very dense, very scholastic, analytic, in fact, hard to read, and so and difficult to understand. So it wasn't popular for those reasons. But broadly speaking of the analytic school, today's psychology seems to have moved to the realm of behavioral change. They want easily defined outcomes that they think can be achieved through various therapeutic techniques. And I think this has been brought on the field largely because of insurances, just my opinion, that they don't want to pay for long, drawn-out exercises that go on year after year after year as you examine your soul and why you are who you are and what your life is all about, which is what analytic psychology would bring you to. They didn't want to pay for that. They would pay for short-term outcomes of achieving objectives. Anyways, in the world of Jung, he introduced the idea of an archetype, which was a very strong, powerful image that existed in the unconscious, mostly unconscious mind, of which he saw several kinds, the most infamous of which was the collective unconscious, meaning, and this is an important idea of Jungian psychology, and one it's most important to artists and writers because it's central to what they do. Jung felt that the collective unconscious was an accumulation of the long history of mankind, both their experiences and natural to the physiology of mankind. I guess if you wanted to put it in current vernacular of the people who study the physical brain, they would start by saying, well, the mind is what the brain does, however that works. So you can imagine that if the DNA of human evolution forced some kinds of structures and connections in these billions of synapses that existed in our head, there well could be patterns and collections which underlie archetypical images that get passed on genetically from generation to generation and tribe to tribe, country to country. In the era of Jung, there were 4 archetypes which were the most important. There was the self, which was our outer image, how we like to portray ourselves to the rest of the world, who we try to think that we are. There's the shadow, which is kind of the depository of all the things we don't want anyone else to know, even ourselves often. All the evil or impish things, sexual things, prohibited things, all about ourselves, the dark side that we don't want out. And then there was the anima and the animus, which the anima being the female images that appear in the unconscious of a normal sexual male, and the animus is the opposite of that, the images, masculine images that appear in the subconscious of an ordinary female, normal female. And those are the elements. There are many, many kinds of archetypes. I think Jung articulated in maybe another 10 or 15, but there could be many, many more than that. The point of that is that, let me read something to you from Freud's own, Jung's own work. That'll give you a sense not only of why it's hard to read what he has to say, but why it's important to us as artists. The great poetry that creates from out the soul of mankind is inaccurately explained if we reduce it to the personal. For whatever the collective unconscious forces its way, for wherever the collective unconscious forces its way into experience and weds itself to the collective consciousness, there occurs a creative act which concerns the entire contemporaneous epoch. The work emerging from this is, in the deepest sense of the word, a message to the contemporaries. For this reason, Faust touches something in the soul of every German. For this reason also Dante's fame is immortal, and The Shepherd of Hermas has almost become a canonical book. I'd like to come back to that thought in a little bit when we get to talk to Manuel Comacho, and you can see the Spanish and English versions of something, and we can grab a hold of this thing of cultural translation and what kinds of feelings could be in one language that really aren't in the other, and how that confronts the artist. An epoch is like the soul of an individual. It has its particular, specifically limited state of consciousness and requires, therefore, a compensation which is accomplished by the collective unconscious in such a way that the poet or seer or leader lends itself to the unspoken things of the time and brings forth, through image or act, that which is awaited by the incomprehended common need, whether this be for good or evil, for the healing of an epoch or its destruction. And then just the last sentence here, delving once more into the primal state of the soul is the secret of artistic creation and the effect of art. For at this stage of experience, it is no longer the individual, but the people who experience something. This discussion of Jung and analytic psychology could go on for another 2 years without stopping. But I'm going to stop now. But the thought is that I want to leave with you, the listeners, the writers who want to learn something from us, from this program. Learning the language of archetypal images can help you understand your own thoughts and articulate them more clearly to a broader audience. Let's end there for today.
So can we say that today our problems don't stem from the fact we hate our mother?
That's right.
Indeed, that sounds kind of humorous, but that's the kind of thing that brought the breach between Freud and Jung in their era. And they were, at one time, Jung was the protege of Freud, and then he started having these ideas that Freud couldn't stomach,
agree
and
with.
he got cut off.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, good point.
Well, I'm going to introduce Manuel Comacho. He's one of the writers that belongs to the Heritage Writers community. Mr. Comacho is an educator. He teaches at San Joaquin Delta College, Spanish for Spanish speakers. He is a writer, a short story writer, poet, playwright, and is often published in Joaquin magazine. And today, Mr. Comacho is going to read one of his pieces in Spanish, and Ms. Struck is going to read the same part in English, and it's really lovely. So here they come.
I just want to add that I have not written this. This is both Spanish and English versions are written by Mr. Senor Camacho.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction, Leslie. Thank you so much. This poem is called Ray of Light. I will read it in English, and then Anne is going to be very kind to read it in English.
You read it in Spanish.
I'll read it in
Yeah.
Spanish. It goes like this. En un guiño de nubes, un joven rayo de luz escapó, travieso, olvidó mirar atrás, se alejó en un destello, errando, visitó rincones remotos, iluminó caminos ciegos, desencantados. El tiempo aleatorio, juguetón, desvió su trayecto, descubrió a los niños, cientos de niños, enjaulados, hijos de la guerra, perdidos, con los ojos crucificados, con cadenas en las neuronas. Niños incrustados en el amor vacío, en el estrepitoso espacio negro del desprecio. Sus voces ahogadas las aluna el veneno infernal. Su destino está muerto. No existen sábanas dulces de música acuática, ni almohadas que cantan elegías de regazo. El rayo de luz sufrió convulsiones nostálgicas. Partieron las nubes para siempre a su morada desértica. Y el joven rayo de luz, con un guiño agradecido, se quedó a arrullar y dar calor a los niños.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is beautiful.
It is.
Thank you.
You
So-
know what I would like to suggest, without intruding too much? What I'd like to suggest, without intruding too much, is to go back and now read a little piece of it, just one idea, and then let Anne read the English version of that so that we can see them a little closer side by side. There's so much material there. If we let that sit and go read the English, we won't really be able to interrelate them. So let's go ahead and read a piece and then let Anne give a translation.
Great idea. Rayo de luz. En un guiño de nubes, un joven rayo de luz escapó travieso. Olvidó mirar atrás, se alejó en un destello, errando. Visitó rincones remotos, iluminó caminos ciegos, desencantados. Oops.
Okay. It visited remote places. Oh, you want me to start at the beginning?
Yes.
Yeah, read
Sorry.
what corresponds to just what you
Ray
read.
of light. In a blink of clouds, a young ray of light escaped, mischievous. It forgot to look back. It moved away in a sparkle, roving. It visited remote places. It illuminated blind roads, disenchanted.
El tiempo aleatorio, juguetón, desvió su trayecto. Descubrió a los niños, cientos de niños, enjaulados, hijos de la guerra, perdidos, con los ojos crucificados, con cadenas en las neuronas. Niños incrustados en el amor vacío, en el estrepitoso espacio negro del desprecio.
fortuitous time, playful, diverted its trajectory. It discovered the kids, hundreds of kids, encaged, sons of the war lost, with their eyes crucified, with their neurons chained, kids embedded in empty love, in the deafening black space of contempt.
Manuel, would you comment as we go on the translation and how accurately you think that reflects what the artist was trying to convey?
Sure. First of all, I'm not responsible for the translation. At Joaquin Magazine, they I translate as much as I can. It hurts when I translate my own work because I don't have the vocabulary in English to be able to convey the same meaning and the rhythm of the language, etc. But I do what I can. And then at Joaquin Magazine, they edit the writing, they revise it, and they work on the English translation. When I hear somebody else reading the poem in English, I hear a different voice, and it strikes me as something that I wish I had, because I listen to that voice, and it's not the voice that I heard when I was writing the poem. So it just sounds beautiful, and I wish I had that inner voice to get it out
Yes.
when I'm writing.
It's like writing a duet, in like a tenor and soprano, or an alto and a baritone. You can
Mhm.
hear the same music in two different voices, and one adds to the other.
Yes. Yeah.
Was it the same story that evolved? Was it the same story that evolved in each sequence?
I certainly hope so. because because every time I read it, it just moves me, right? It just brings me back to when I was writing and trying to remember what I was feeling at the time. So I hope it does the same to the listener. Now I'm listening to Anne, and her voice is so beautiful, and it sounds so alive, even though the content is kind of dark sometimes. But even as dark as it is, I have so much fun writing it. You know, I mean, it doesn't depress me. It
No.
doesn't depress me. On the contrary, it just gives me joy. Yeah. You want me to continue?
Continue.
All right. Sus voces ahogadas las anula el veneno infernal. Su destino está muerto. No existen sábanas dulces de música acuática, ni almohadas que cantan elegías de regazo. El rayo de luz sufrió convulsiones nostálgicas. Partieron las nubes para siempre a su morada desértica. Y el joven rayo de luz, con un guiño agradecido, se quedó a arrullar y dar calor a los niños.
Its drowned voices are annulled by the infernal venom. Its destiny is dead. Sweet blankets of aquatic music do not exist. Neither do pillows that sing elegies on a lap. The ray of light suffered nostalgic convulsions. The clouds departed forever to their desert home. The young sun ray, with a grateful wink, stayed to lull to sleep and give warmth to the kids.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Very good.
De nada.
It sounds wonderful. Well, this other poem.
Dr. Cantu, could you comment on this? Because I know you've had one leg in both worlds, of the world of the Spanish and the world of the English. And I've always appreciated your insights. Jose used to write, and he hasn't shared with us lately, but write about his experiences in childhood. Though angry, were often insightful. And so how about sharing some of your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm biased, of course. I thought the Spanish is so much more beautiful than the translation in English. Invariably, when I attend Spanish-speaking services and I hear the speaker in Spanish, hey, I can't help but stand in awe of them. Wish that I had that vocabulary. I've lost so much of it. My wife doesn't speak Spanish. My children don't speak Spanish. My grandchildren are taking Spanish in school. Okay, but we've lost so much of the vocabulary. But yes, I grew up. Spanish was my first language. In fact, my name, Jose Francisco Cantu, I couldn't speak English as a boy. There would happen to be a Baptist kindergarten from Baptist church. It was being offered to the barrio kids for free. Mom enrolled me when I was about 4 years old. The only requisite was that everything had to be conducted in English. Even my name, which is translated from Jose Francisco Cantu to Joe Frank Cantu. I grew up thinking that was my name. Everything, in fact, took form as Joe Frank. My school years, my junior high, my high school, my junior college experience, my postal service employment, my driver's license, Social Security, my military experience, Joe Frank Cantu. And then one day, I was about 25, 26 years old. For whatever reason, I got a copy of my birth certificate. There it says, Jose Frank. I said, Mom, what is this? I'm Joe Frank. She says, well, it's the same thing. Okay. I couldn't deal with that. It was very difficult for me to come to my conviction that I am Jose Francisco. It wasn't until after my second master's degree when I finally said, you know, this is who I am. This is who I'm going to be. I am Jose Francisco Cantu. I began to use that. And I was 37 at the time. So I've been Jose Francisco since 37 years of age to now being 81. That's who I am. People call me Joe. I don't answer. I don't answer. My name's Jose. If it was good enough for Mom and Dad, it's good enough for me. Someone said, is that like Joe? No, it's like Jose. It's like Jose. I did. And now I would wish that I could go back and, in fact, inculcate that added vocabulary because I find it extremely beautiful, as your reading was. In fact, I've been invited at a local Baptist church to preach for them in Spanish. I can't. And in fact, the pastor invited me, give me a couple of your sermons. I said, fine. I gave him a couple of my written English sermons. He gave up. He couldn't translate it. But I love the Spanish language. And I love to hear my dad on recordings because he was a recording artist in Spanish, in the Spanish field. In fact, was inducted into the Spanish Hall of Fame, in the Tejano Music Hall of Fame. So I'm very proud of him, proud of him. But thank you for asking, Rob.
Wonderful.
You know, where we first ran into this, you know, in Stockton, the Heritage Writers Community is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, writing organization. We started in 05 or 06. And so we're in 13, 14 years kind of thing. Some years back, when we were still meeting at the Central Library, we had a Indian man come in and read his material to us in his own native language, Punjabi, I think. And I was struck by the rhythms and sound and beauty of what he had to say. And I agree with Jose. English is not really a melodic language.
Oh, I don't know.
No.
I think it is.
It depends on the craftsman.
Okay.
The craftsperson.
It is a dynamic language. It's ever changing, and I find it very challenging and beautiful. I really do.
I stand admonished, and I appreciate that.
I can jump. I have read text in English that have been translated from Spanish to English, and they're wonderful. They're sometimes I even think it's even better than the Spanish one, maybe because of the content, but the translator is a really it's an art. Translation is an
Absolutely.
art.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I just have great respect for those who are really good translators, and I can say that because when I translate, it just hurts. I don't like it,
Yeah.
so I don't enjoy it. So those who do it,
It's another
Do it well.
gift.
They do
yeah,
it well.
yeah.
Absolutely.
But you never get exactly the same thing, and
It's
you
true.
lose some of that original
In the translation.
language in translation.
It's true. A good example of that was when I tried to read The Grapes of Wrath in English.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't do it. And then I got a translation in Spanish,
Huh.
and it was great.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I just went through it because the kind of language he uses, I just couldn't get through it because I wasn't familiar,
Mhm.
and it was difficult
Yeah.
to read. Yeah.
And I started learning. Well, I spoke Spanish as a child. I no longer speak it fluently, but I worked in two places where I was the only person that wasn't Latinx because I spoke Spanish because I lived in Panama, and then I took Spanish at Delta so that I could read the Spanish mystics in their actual language, San Juan de la Cruz and Teresa de Avila.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful
Yeah.
stuff. Very powerful in English or Spanish. So,
Yes.
Well, Jose, I would say it's not too late. Can you go ahead and begin to write something? It doesn't have to be what was asked of you, but write something fresh that you have in mind using your primary language.
English is my primary language.
it is now.
Well,
Spanish was my first language, but
Okay.
English is my primary language.
okay, your first language then. You might find that quite
Certainly challenging.
quite an adventure.
Certainly challenging.
Quite an adventure.
I actually tried once. I wrote one poem and gave up.
You know what's interesting about that is that when I write, I have to do it in Spanish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I don't have the language. Because in English I don't have the language because it's not my primary language. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
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 I understand.
You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying. You know
yeah.
what I'm saying.
I mean, I
right.
can try
Right.
Sure.
to write it in English,
Yeah.
but
But you mentioned earlier that you have these meetings on Thursdays for Spanish-speaking storytellers, and then you have one for English-speaking storytellers.
Yes.
I would be very interested in, if my age would not be prohibitive, for me to go and share one or two of
Please do.
my English stories.
please do. Yeah.
My stories tend to be quite long, though, as you well know. But I'd love to share one and with the folks that may have never heard it. I just need to know some more information from you
Yeah.
after the broadcast.
Yeah, you can come to any of the two, the Spanish one or the English one.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody's invited.
Excellent. Thank you
It's
very
free.
much, Manuel. Thank you.
Have you run across any Spanish translations or versions of some of the English classical poets? And I'm thinking now of
Yes.
T.S. Eliot
Yes.
or Walt Whitman.
Poe, yes, yes.
How do they come out?
Well, I haven't read the English version, but the Spanish version is always, I think, is really good. Yeah. I haven't read them to compare the translations.
Well,
Yeah.
the thing that I would be interested in is not so much the word-by-word translation, but is the underlying feeling really come through? Like in Eliot's work, a lot of the meaning is by implication. It isn't really in the individual words.
Mhm.
We are the hollow men. We are empty men, heads filled with straw.
Hmm.
How do you translate that into?
No idea.
I second that.
Yeah, yeah. We can try.
Thoughts
but-
can be so difficult, so
Yeah, it's
difficult to
difficult.
translate from one language to another with the same passion, with the same energy and power. They lose much in the translation.
Before we wrap up, I know we may read one more of your poems, Manuel, but what I'd like to do is send a shout out to the community to get your voice heard here at Voices of San Joaquin. We're looking for radio plays. If you're a playwright and you've considered maybe having a short play broadcast, we're beginning a radio theater group here. And so if you've got a little short play, doesn't have to be terribly short, please send it to our Heritage Writers community and attach it to an email and send it with a little explanation to Robert Reinarts, because he's our fearless leader. And his email address is rreinarts22.
How does that translate?
Fearless leader. rreinarts22 at comcast.net. That's rreinarts 22 at comcast.net. Thanks.
Very good, very good.
Did you want to do something else, or should we
Well,
wrap
I
up?
have
We're
nothing.
getting pretty close to the end of our
Okay.
hour here.
Manuel, do you have any other poem you'd
Yeah,
like to share?
I have more.
One more.
Go ahead.
You want me to? Okay. Can I give a little background about this
Please.
poem? This poem is titled Eulogy for Miroslava. Miroslava was a reporter in Mexico who wrote about the collusion and the corruption between the drug cartels and the government,
Mm.
and she was gunned down.
Ooh.
And I think it was 2 years ago. I read the article in the paper, and it just made me write this.
Yeah.
And to this day, the investigations are ongoing, and they haven't found the people responsible. You know, blah
What
blah
a
blah.
surprise,
You know,
yeah.
blah blah blah. Yeah, but I wrote this to honor.
Very
her.
good, very
yeah.
good.
So I'll read the first part, and then Anne will read the translation. Okay. It goes like this. Silenciaste una mente más, ya no correrá más la tinta, como hiciste con su sangre, pero la palabra te seguirá, asesino. Tatuada en tu frente, en todos los idiomas, en todos los diccionarios, señalándote, acusándote, asesino.
You silenced one more mind. The ink will flow no more, like you did with her blood, but the word will follow you. Assassin. Tattooed on your forehead in all languages, in all dictionaries, it points at you accusingly. Assassin.
Wow. Very powerful.
8 balazos acallaron la voz, pero la palabra explota como el estruendo de un volcán que te nombra esbirro de Satanás, asesino. Huyes y te escondes, reptil, pero la palabra te persigue cada día, cada hora, cada minuto. No cederá hasta encontrarte, asesino.
8 bullets muted her voice, but the word explodes like the roaring of a volcano that calls you by name, Satan's henchman, assassin. You flee and hide, you reptile, but the word haunts you each day, each hour, each minute, and will not rest until it finds you, assassin.
Por lengua larga la mataste, pues todos somos sus herederos, porque siempre escribiremos, por eso te sentenciamos, asesino. Ella será tu sombra, ella será tu verdugo, ella quien te condena, ella se llama Miroslava, asesino. Ella es la palabra, ella es la voz, ella es la verdad, ella es la que te llama, asesino, asesino, asesino.
A whistleblower you claim to have killed, but we are all her kinship, and we will keep on writing, and that is why we condemn you. Assassin! She will be your shadow, she will be your executioner, she who condemns you, she named Miroslava. Assassin! She is the word, she is the voice, she is the truth, she is the one who calls to you. Assassin! Assassin! Assassin!
Thank you.
Very
Thank you
good,
so
very
much.
good, very
Thank
good. Yeah. I love the ending. Bang! Assassin! You rattlesnake, spiders, and snakes. That's beautiful.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Yes.
I wanna
Thank
all
you. My
for-
pleasure.
For coming, our presenters here and our listeners. We'll be back. Just remember that much of the work that not all, but much of the work here is original to our writers, and they reserve all their rights and ownership for that material. But we'd love to have your comments and ideas. We look at this as a conversation, even though it's awkward in that we're separated by time and space, but we still want to hear what you have to say, and we will take it and absorb it. Thank you very much. Goodbye.